We're now going to hear from Julie Young for 15 minutes, please. Julie is a research fellow in the Centre for Research on Children and Families at the University of East Anglia for nearly 25 years. She's played a key role in several important national and international research projects in this area of practice and law. Her particular areas of expertise are around contact with first or birth families, life story work, and communications within families. Julie is currently working with Adoption England to help modernise and improve practice around maintaining significant relationships in adoption. So, Julie, it's with great pleasure that I introduce you to this forum. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much. That's a lovely introduction. I hope you can hear me and also see my slides. Do I have a thumbs up or a nod?
Yes.
Lovely. Thank you. So, yes, I have the challenge of putting together decades of research at UEA and around the world, in fact, into a few slides and 15 minutes. So I am going to do my best. Sorry, I'm just trying to get everything sorted on my screen. I'm actually going to start by sharing the voices of those who matter most, the ones who live with the consequences of our court decisions. These are all people who've taken part in our research at UEA. There's some adopted adults or some adopted young people speaking to us. And we've heard things like, I felt when I was younger quite empty sometimes. It was like the jigsaw wasn't complete in my life. Another adopted adult told us, reflecting back on a very turbulent teenage period, there was a lot of real negative emotions, a kind of desperation to know who my birth mother was. Perhaps like a lot of teenagers, questioning the authority of parents, feeling that they don't understand you, feeling that perhaps they're the wrong sort of parents, because that's what teenagers do. They think hypothetically and they wonder what things could be like in a different family with different rules. And here she remembers this real desperation. Well, who was my birth mother? And also recalled, because she felt she couldn't share this with her adoptive parent, she told us that she found her birth mother by herself, went back to stay with her birth mother for a while, but ultimately now as an adult, she's able to look back and say, I was adopted by the best people. It was right that I was adopted, but went through this very turbulent time of just not knowing. A teenager we spoke to talked about having just words that explained why they were adopted, but this wasn't enough for them, sharing that they really had no real idea why they were adopted, and feeling it's an uncertainty that hurts so much. They said it bothers them daily, even now, like a constant burn of just not knowing why. Another young teenager told us that they wake up and cry in their sleep. They imagine their birth dad in their mind, who has now died. Sadly, a lot of birth parents who've had children adopted do pass away before the child will hit 18 or move into adulthood. And here they are wondering about that and wondering whether this mum is still out there. How is she? Can I get in touch with her? And another young adult remembering how they were as a child and feeling that they always used to push people away, a sense of they could be rejected again. If I'm the one pushing you away, you can't reject me. These are just a sample of quotes, but they're quite typical from a lot of research that we've done and other people have done, where we've spoken to adopted people, adopted adults. Some of these feelings can start even in middle childhood, quite young. And they show the long-term everyday consequences of a focus on adoption as this happy ever after, where we see adoption as primarily about creating new families, and the birth family seen as a complication or even as a threat. Practice that's well-intentioned, but we can see that it does leave children with a blank, neutral space, a gap that gets filled with imagination, without any real information to work with. What is quite typical is that we hear people say they feel a sense of rejection or self-blaming that maybe this removal from birth parents or inability of their birth parents to care perhaps is because of how they were in their family. Now, adoption is for life. When we make a decision in adoption, we need to have our focus on the lifelong journey of a child, a teenager, an adult. And that's why this research, this long-term research right into adulthood and into old age is really important, because adoption is about permanence. It should give security, stability, love, and a strong sense of identity and belonging. And in many cases, it does provide a lot of that. It really does provide forever loving families, safety and security. But there are issues with it, as we've seen in the previous slide. And some of those issues perhaps are to do with the way that we've done adoption. Not adoption per se. I don't believe we should throw out adoption. I think we do see that there are many positives that come out of it. But I think there are negatives that we really do need to make a note of, aware of, and think about how can we do this better. So a slide trying to summarize much research that is out there. It tells us that loss is damaging. When we sever relationships, we are teaching young children that people can just disappear. And that includes, for example, love siblings or trusted grandparents, that they can just disappear. Even if the parent was neglectful or abusive, dangerous or scary, children, that's their world. And we're teaching them these people can just disappear, and the grief that they have, they are left to process alone and try to deal with questions alone. We know when we speak to children or teenagers that they really struggle to initiate thoughts about their birth family with adoptive parents. There's a fear of upsetting, a fear of that they might hurt their adoptive parents if they raise these questions, and it feels awkward, it feels strange. We know that most adopted children are at least moderately curious about their birth family. It's not out of sight, out of mind. One American study showed that at least 3/4 of teenagers were at least moderately curious. And some are really curious, like a desperation to know, as we saw in a couple of those earlier quotes. And of course, that critical need to know can also be there when you're having your own children as an adult, when you're moving into older age and wondering if you have a cancer risk in your family, for example. Some of these can be really crucial, vital questions. But even for a teenager, just knowing whether big feet ran in your family or when you might lose your hair, these questions can be really important, really crucially important as well. We know that when you don't have any sense of who your birth family are, you can lose any real understanding of why you were removed. And again, we saw that in some of those earlier quotes. Real struggle to understand a story when you've just got words that you can't really picture, you can't really make sense of. Gaps can create assumptions, fears, fantasies, longings, confusion, distrust, not understanding why. Research has shown it can have long-term consequences. And just a couple of examples to show how common these feelings are. The recent Adopted Voices inquiry showed that 1 in 3 young people, adopted young people, didn't feel confident in their identity or felt they fully understood their story. And the Adoption Barometer in 2023 indicated that around 20% of teenagers sought out connection with birth relatives themselves without the support. If you have an unmet need, you might try to deal with that yourself. We know, again, from decades of research that letters actually rarely work well. It's been our dominant form of post-adoption connection between adoptive parents and birth family, yet lots of limitations. We pick up lots of dissatisfaction with it. They're really hard to write, and I think we'll probably hear more about that from one of our guest speakers later, about the challenge of writing letters when you're putting such emotional things into words. But young people also say that they don't really bring the person to life. You might have questions that you can't get answered for a whole year. You might have critical queries, which are really difficult to deal with via this letter. And a lot of young people also tell us that the excessive redaction can strip out real personal detail the personalities, the quirks, the shared interests that can make them feel connected and a sense of really knowing the people. If they don't address the difficult history as well, or present a sanitized picture, they can leave children with an idealized view of birth parents, which can also make things really challenging, and shocks and disappointment when children may have a reunion when they're older.
5 minutes, please. And Julie, I hate to do that, but
yeah, so I know, I've got to move quickly. Face-to-face contact, it shows us that research consistently finds it actually doesn't undermine the child's attachment to adoptive parents. It often strengthens adoptive parent openness. And that is crucial because we know that communicative openness is such an important characteristic in adoption. Meetups are more likely to also endure over time, and particularly with siblings, brothers and sisters, or extended family members, you almost universally viewed as positive. What we know matters most is whether it's good quality, whether it's stable, and in particular that the young people themselves are happy with it. If they're happy with it, that leads to more positive outcomes. What we hear from people is that sometimes meetups can be quite awkward, but at least you get to know your story. You get to know the reality of who these people are, and it helps you understand yourself. We also hear that sometimes when you meet people, you learn that they actually do love you. You might think that when you don't hear from them, or the letters are very basic and simplistic, that they're people who don't really care, because often we strip out that personal, don't we? One of our teenagers said that when they finally meet their birth mother, they realized that they were wanted, they were loved. And that crucial quality of feeling you were cared for, so important for young people who talked about why contact matters. A slide here of international research findings also link positive features with more open connections. And I've got research here from the from the USA and Australia, where keeping connections is much more mandatory than we have here, and in Northern Ireland. You'll get the slides, so you'll see the positive things that can come out of this. And it's not saying that they can be easy. Sometimes it can be really tricky to keep these connections, but in the long term, people often look back and say, well, actually, it did help. That's not to say that we should keep in contact or have face-to-face contact in every case. Absolutely not. Research distinguishes between relationships where people can demonstrate care and engage positively, or perhaps they're just benign or awkward or difficult in the short term, but long term, they don't actually cause long-term damage. But there can be cases where they can cause harm. I know Chris is going to be talking more about that later. So I'll jump over some of these slides and he can talk more about that. But we need to make sure we don't undermine the very safe family that the child is in, that they need to keep safe and they need to feel loved. But possibly they can have both. We've looked at lots of factors which are associated with positive contact. I know Chris has as well, and he's going to be talking about that later. And these are the kinds of qualities that we should be looking for when we're trying to see where we can set up positive contact connections. We've featured those in our guide, which is available on our website. I've got the link at the end of my slides, which helps you go through features which might help decision-making around making contact plans. And Chris has developed that into a much more sophisticated model. So by no means are we saying we need to do this in every case, but it's about looking for where we can have positive connections and in what way. What we should be asking, what legal professionals should be asking is, have we really thought about everybody in the child's network who could have positive contribution in their life, providing them with a sense of being cared for, providing them with a sense of who they were and about their story? Have we looked at really whether there was any face-to-face connections that we can maintain, because we know actually it can work better in many cases than letters, and really evidenced why we're making those decisions? Are we making sure we're offering independent support to birth relatives and helping them participate constructively in contact planning? Are we truly making sure that this is a a child-centered, individualized plan that will be effective throughout their life. That doesn't mean it should stay the same, of course, but one that is fluid and flexible as they grow. Have we really thought about all the communication options that can be important? Because we've done research recently on digital contact, digital communication, and seen that that can work really well in some cases. Does the plan include a mechanism for review as the child grows? And where direct contact is not now recommended, does it note how and when this can be reconsidered? And something that I always recommend is we try to at least get adults together, adults face to face, at least early on or at some points throughout the child's early life, because that can be a really good basis for the child's connections. All these principles that
Julie, okay, we've hit the mark, but
sorry, I thought we were half a minute ago. But yeah, sorry, SGO. I will have a slide to point out some differences around that as well. But I think all the principles that I've shared so far in adoption really do apply to children within SGO families as well, except they can be more distinct and complex, but can have benefits too. We do know that children really appreciate natural family meetups, and sometimes SGO families can provide that. But there are issues which I deal with more thoroughly in my research briefing as well. I've got to end there, but